As the largest U.S. military buildup since the Iraq War has deployed to the Middle East, a move to pressure Iran ahead of talks in Geneva on Thursday, in Iran, we saw just extraordinary scenes play out over the weekend and into the start of the week. See, Iran's new academic term began on Saturday, and instead of going into their classes, university students took to the streets in droves. These protests ended up spreading to several cities. It's lasting several days now, and many of the chants are pointedly calling for the end of the Islamic Republic. These students were galvanized by grief and anger at the government and security forces for the massacre of many thousands of protesters in early January. But I want to talk about why we may be at the point of no return, which doesn't mean an imminent regime collapse at all, but could mean that citizens in Iran are just never going to forgive this government for the violence they saw directed at largely young people in January and are still seeing today within Iran's prison system, where as many as 14,000 people could be detained. And according to X-ray images obtained by The Guardian, there is evidence that security forces deliberately targeted vital organs of protesters, taking off the table that all these deaths were an unintentional outcome of, say, aggressive crowd control. And I just want to put this violence into historical and political context. Protester death toll from January, many of these deaths happened within a 2 to 3 day period. So the group Human Rights Activist News Agency say they have verified around 7,000 protester deaths and are working to verify around 10,000 more for a potential total of 17,000 protester deaths. And the only death figure we have from the regime was given on January 21st in a statement, and their figure was 3,117 deaths. And even on the lowest end of this scale, this level of violence against protesters has few historical parallels. So the Tiananmen Square massacre in China, where 1 million protesters were violently crushed by the army on June 4th, 1989. The protester death toll there is thought to be 700 to 1,000 protesters killed. I've seen figures as high as 3,000. In Egypt, the massacre of protesters in Rabaa Square is anywhere from 800 to 1,500 people killed in a single day on August 14, 2013. And as cataclysmic as those events were, in Iran in January, protesters were massacred all over the country. Here's a map of where all the protests happened, and as you can see, it was in the capital, coastal cities, rural towns, and when this violence is that geographically widespread, it's harder for the government to minimize the violence or deny it ever happened, as China and Egypt, with the massacres I just mentioned, tried to do, because every corner of society across Iran is either burying their dead, looking for loved ones, or know a family who is. And the disgust over what the government and security forces did and are doing is so deep that many Iranians are even changing the way they are mourning the dead. Funerals and 40-day commemorations are becoming a celebration of life in defiance of the regime. But this week, a reporter asked President Trump if he had anything to say to the Iranian people, and his response wasn't focused on the violence against protesters or democratic reforms, but, well, it was this.
Do you have any message to the Iranian people?
The Iranian people in Iran or people here?
People in Iran.
They better negotiate a fair deal.